Greetings from the Dark Continent. Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail, here to bring you another conversation here that I think the format of, or the guest of rather, you'll definitely recognize from previous years. Russell, I think it's now the third year in a row we're doing like a tone-setting conversation. It started with one type of interview like this 3 years ago, and every year we've had this type of conversation in this setting, and always something out of that conversation sets the tone for the rest of the year. So for me, just personally, it's a very useful opportunity, but I know the audience also always finds it very insightful as well. So thank you for your time and welcome on the show.
Thanks, Adams. It's good to be here. I do feel a little bit of pressure because we had some success from the first one or two interviews. So let's see how we go. Let's take it organically, and hopefully we can just, even if we create one or two little insights for people that could help nudge things in the right direction, then we've made progress. So yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think this also latches on to another thing. I like to approach a year with some themes in mind as well. I know many people have New Year's resolutions. I try to approach a year with things I want to tackle this year or try to figure out or achieve. And I think this year specifically, the goal of clearing my thinking, getting my focus on where it needs to be. We live in a time where people's focus is shotgun approach everywhere. It's not laser focused, it's not sniper focused. People in the internet and information age, people are focusing on a trillion things at once. And it's actually, I think, very detrimental. And that's why I wanted to start today with on the topic of clear thinking. And I think that's maybe the best. Let's start it very simply about clear thinking about solutions and clear thinking about what needs to be done and the theme of focus. Have you been having some thoughts on this theme as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is again a huge theme. I think you're hitting on the right thing. We live in a world, and we're all victims of this in a sense, and have a problem with this, and myself included, where we get easily distracted. Attention spans are, I think, all of our attention spans have probably dropped in the last 10 years through this kind of age of social media and hyper onlineness. I think it's not good for attention spans and for kind of clear and focused thinking. So it's certainly something that has to be combated. And I think this links into the what I know we're going to talk about a little bit more broadly today, which is the scattered attention that emerges when politics is a consumer exercise rather than a productive exercise. It's a consumption exercise versus a productive exercise. And what I mean by that is when you are seeing the news and political commentary and podcasts and YouTube shows and everything as your way of kind of being engaged in the political. And it really becomes a case of looking for the next hit. I'm looking for that next edgy podcast where they really stick it to the libs, where they really stick it to the woke guys, and they have a really hot take about this or that. And I think that it's from that arises this very kind of short attention span. What's my next political consumer good hit that I'm going to take? Part of the clear thinking message is to in a sense slow down, get more strategic, and act in a more deliberate way. Once you start acting in the real world, once you start doing politics as a productive exercise, you in a sense have to be focused, because you can only physically do one thing at a time. Whereas when your mind is all over the place and you're on your phone and you can kind of, you can be very scattered. But once you commit to executing on a certain strategy, or doing something real, like perhaps making your neighborhood safer, you have to be quite focused. And the strictures of reality start imposing themselves upon you. If you need to establish a neighborhood watch, you have to get real human beings to do real things and get real firearms and get real bullets.
Not just like a page on
not just
online.
Like a page or give an edgy comment on a comment thread, or kind of get a hit of dopamine because your guy, stuck it to the woke crowd, So I think action and focused thinking are two very complementary dynamics. And I think, in other words, I think what I'm saying is that where you see a lot of scattered thinking and a lot of short-termism and a lot of and a lack of focus, you also see inaction. You see people that are sitting back, passively consuming politics. And in that dynamic, the people that are doing politics as a productive exercise, for good or bad, are the ones that are winning. And there's this idea out there that we're in a battle of ideas. Now, I don't want to trivialize ideas. Ideas are, we're talking about ideas right now. Idea generation, propagation, the sharing of ideas, that's the genesis of action. It's super important. But if people get stuck circling around ideas and worshipping the ideas and refining the ideas and being enamored with their little theories and their little constructs, and they don't act and they don't implement, they're going to be on the losing end of the political power dynamic, where power is established in the real world through real actions affecting very, very real things. So I'm maybe jumping into a whole bunch of themes that we might want to get into, but when we talk about clear thinking or unfocused thinking, the corollary of those two things is action versus inaction. And I think the right kind of action mustn't just be spontaneous and unthought out. So ideas matter. We spoke 2 years ago about there's a time to leave and there's a time to dig a trench. There's a time to discuss ideas, and then there's a time to act on those ideas. People, very, very few people move through to the action part. And it's the action part where the ideas really get tested and properly refined. And it draws out a humility, because acting in the real world is complicated. Your theory can say a whole bunch of wonderful things, but actually implementing something in the real world, it gets refined through that fire, creates a humility, creates, I think, even more focus, and you actually practicing how to act successfully, as opposed to just living in this kind of cyberspace of ideas. So there's a time for ideas and there's a time for action. For me, that bridge from ideas to action is where clear thinking is absolutely necessary. That's the bridge. The bridge is, right, got a bunch of ideas, here's how I'm going to act on those ideas, here's the clarity I need and the focus that I need, and then I need a feedback loop. Was I successful? Was that properly implemented? And then kind of reprocessing that, as opposed to living in this kind of very scattered, very inactive political space.
Right. While you were describing this pitfall that we can always very easily fall into this constant refining of an idea, I just thought of something. It's not a deep idea. It's almost like folk knowledge, common knowledge of the pitfall of waiting for the perfect time to do something. You've heard the excuse, I'll write a book or do my thesis or start a business when everything is perfect, when I have exactly the right amount of capital, exactly the right amount of inspiration, the perfect idea, then I'll do it. Then I'll do X, Y, and Z. And those people that tell you that story, anyone that's been a human in human society and has friends that have had those types of ideas know that person's not going to do that project. It's the old saying goes, perfect is the enemy of good, but I'd like to change it a little bit. Perfect is the enemy of the real. So the perfect idea is never going to be real, because you're going to be chasing that perfect idea or perfect theory until you're on your deathbed, and then you will never have implemented it. So I think you're touching on something very important there, that it's much more, ideas are very important, debates and refining your ideas is important, iron sharpens iron, but we also have to get going. Also have to start turning this into something real.
Mate, if I could just quickly jump in, very often two friends discussing ideas where that iron is sharpening iron, they might get to an impasse where one has a particular view of how things are going to play out, let's say, in the future, and another one thinks slightly differently, or they just get to a place where they can't kind of resolve it, and they might sort of have an argument, or they might stop being friends for a while, because maybe that's a big place of disagreement. Usually that's the place where someone needs to go and actually do something and prove whether something works or not.
They'll win the argument. If they're stuck on a point about what's the best way forward, the first guy to implement that idea successfully is going to win.
So I mean, I don't want to come across that we're being anti-intellectual. Ideas really do matter. Ideas have consequences, as the famous conservative saying goes.
As my grandfather said, rather do nothing than do something stupid.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, certain action can be extremely harmful, and unthought out action can be very, very detrimental. So there's a place for ideas, but and I've been someone who's been prone to sort of circling around an idea and refining that idea because I like theory. I like economic theory. I like social and political theory, and there's place for that because we need reality is exceedingly complex, and we need to create these abstractions and these simplified models of reality, okay, not as things to live by, because that can get you into a lot of trouble, but as analytical tools to compartmentalize this complexity and draw out some insights from it. That's the role of theory, and to some extent even of ideology. So to the extent that there's a place for ideology, it's not so much in implementing an ideology, because that can lead to hell on earth. It's in using it as an analytical framework to understand something about human nature. The ideology of liberalism, to the extent that you agree or disagree with it or not, fixes upon some truth about reality. The fact that some people take those elements of truth and absolutize them, well, we can disagree with that approach, but the idea that individual human freedom is an important thing and an important aspect of human society, of course. The idea that community is an important aspect of society under a communitarian sort of model, yeah, absolutely. But the minute we start building an entire kind of structure of action around these simplified models, we tend to run into a lot of trouble. So I think it's a case of using theoretical frameworks appropriately, using them for what they're meant for, and then going and acting carefully and with humility in the real world, but also boldly. Action is risky. Ideas, the realm of ideas, and why it's so comfortable to circle around the realm of ideas and not go into the world of action is because it's fairly risk-free. It's fairly risk-free. You can sit and entertain your mind with these different back and forth of different debates and different ideas. But going and actually testing something out there, you put your reputation on the line, your money on the line, your time on the line.
Risk failure.
There's a risk of failure, all those kinds of things. But I think people need to start exercising those muscles. And the theme that draws through, a couple of the conversations we've had is, get out there and build solutions. And you don't have to go and take the biggest possible risks. The ability to take big risks, let's put it this way, starts from taking small risks. There's very few people that straight off the bat, there are some people like this, but that can go and take enormous risks straight away. Exercising and taking risk is actually a muscle that you exercise. And once you take a little bit of risk, you see this in the investment world. You can have all sorts of theories about investments. I come from this world. Actually putting your money somewhere, that's the test. Can you have success?
Putting your money where your mouth is.
Putting your money where your mouth is, and no one should be expected to go and take a big, bold, bet on some huge investment, even though that could be a thing that down the line you want to do. But start somewhere. Exercise those talents, as the parable would go. Actually invest somewhere in something. Yes, you might lose, but start exercising that risk muscle. I think the same thing applies to the political sphere. We've got a whole bunch of, all of us succumb to this problem to some extent. I think a lot of people on the conservative side of the spectrum, but quite frankly, all over the show, are political consumers. We need to start exercising our political producer muscles, What does that mean? It means doing politics, and don't think of politics as political parties' elections. The realm of the political is the realm of figuring out common problems in society as peacefully as possible and with as much mutual kind of contentment as possible. It's trying to discover and then implement and actuate the good, the good for a local context or a local community or society, and then broader than that as well. And so the political, to be a political producer can be to do anything in the sphere of the common and for the common good that achieves those ends. So that can be a community security watch. It could be creating some kind of educational structure because there's nothing like that near you. It could be creating a structure that defends common property against land invasions, which seek to come in and destroy the value of that property and create, crime and problems in that area. So it's acting in a very practical way. Now here's the real thing. So we can talk about that. That's a nice idea. It's hard to do that, and the reason why it's hard is because it takes work. Exercising the producer muscle is harder. Humans are wired to gravitate towards the lazy, the consumptive. And nature's in a way wired like this. If you give a wild lion free meat, if you just dump, dead, blesbok there on the side of the road, the lions are just going to come and eat that. They're going to not exercise their hunting muscles. So mass media, and when I say mass media, just the ubiquity of media on our phones, social media, internet media, has turned us into very passive political animals. And I think a lot of the theme running through the thread of the last couple of years of talks is figuring out how to start exercising those new muscles. And I think it's hard. I think it needs to be done in sort of mutual encouragement in communities, because doing this on your own feels, where do you even begin? How do you start to make your suburb or your city better? Where do you even start? You don't have the resources for that. But so I think, it's just, and we won't cover that all today, but just giving people the tools to know where to begin. And yes, part of that is joining or funding community organizations and civil society organizations like AfriForum and Sakeliga and so on. Yes, it's great. But in addition to that, to actually start devoting more of your time, and here's the hard message for people. You've got to devote more of your time and resource to producing order in society than you do to leisure and to enjoyment. That's just the hard message. And it's hard for me, it's hard for you, because we get our incomes and we want to spend it, we want to go on holidays, we want to go to nice restaurants, we want to enjoy life. We mustn't forget to enjoy life, but we need to apportion, I think, particularly in our context in South Africa, more resource and time to producing political order. I don't see enough of that yet. I think we're going in the right direction, and I'd like to see more people getting off their backsides, stop consuming so much politics and start producing politics.
And that's a critical point. A lot of what we consider political activity falls into that leisure and entertainment category, yes, not into the action and bringing about order category.
People consume this stuff and they think that they're engaged in politics. And they're not really moving the needle.
They're just consuming a product with a political theme to it.
Correct, yeah.
But and I think we referenced this in the last time we talked. Your colleague Gerard van Onselen has this metaphor of the derailed train for not just South Africa, many issues. But the derailed train as a metaphor for the issue at hand, we've already seen every side of it. We've 3D modeled it. We've done sketches. We've sent it to the experts. It's been a PhD.
We've sent it in for forensics.
Everything. We know exactly how messed up the train is. But now it sounds strange, but that's the easy part. The difficult part is now, how do we solve the problem? Not even just a question of how do we get the train back on the rail. Maybe we have to build a completely different, maybe that rail system was the problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think on that note, growing up in the internet age and experiencing the one day we woke up and the internet was there. But there's a common phenomenon on the internet called going down a rabbit hole. I mean, a lot of people that we know talk about This weekend I went down this rabbit hole.
hole,
So
yeah.
nice. 3 hours, 4 hours, I learned so much. Great. But then you're talking about a lot of times, as you said, a consumer political product. But the thing why I think a rabbit hole is the perfect metaphor for this type of activity is you can get lost in a rabbit hole. You can get trapped down there. And the thing is, now you're consuming information. It's of a political nature, so you're getting aware of what's going on around you. That's excellent. But I think the pursuit of truth is definitely noble. It's something that we need to be pursuing the truth. We can't live by lies, and we can't spread lies. But at the same time, once you've woken up, or other people have woken up, to use the terminology, what do you do now? What's the next step? What are you going to do about what you've discovered? You've discovered a truth about the world, maybe even a radical truth about the world around you. What are you going to do with that information? Is that going to drive you to just consume more rabbit hole content? Or are you going to use that truth now to do something about? Because a lot of the time this truth is disturbing. A lot of the time it's something that troubles you.
Yes.
But it seems that at the moment that paradigm just has the implication that now you just have to go out and vote. That's what you're going to do to punish the system.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, that's not how you punish the system. The system just funnels you into almost a false sense of you're making a difference. The real stuff really comes into where the tire hits the road. As you said, what centers of order are you going to build? And here the ANC are 100% correct in their almost worship of the balance of forces. It's an excellent approach. I mean, you look at what it basically boils down to is where is power balanced? Are the powers that be and the order that I live in and the momentum of action, is it on my side or my enemy's side? And that determines what I'm doing. If it's not on my side, the implication is I better start doing something to get that momentum and power on my side, even if it's just something small in my capacity. And that's the shift what we're going to have to do. There's nothing wrong with pursuing truth. There's nothing wrong with pursuing and gaining revelations about the world that might have been hidden from you. But then that's not the end. That's not the end product. It's not just getting those revelations.
There's long been this philosophical concept, if you go back to the ancient Greeks and back into ancient philosophy, there's always been this tension. This very conversation is just a rehash of a conversation for thousands of years.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Exactly. There's always been this tension and between theory and practice. And it's long been considered far more difficult and virtuous and stretching to transform your theory into actionable strategy. So I think it's a rehash of a lot of the theme we've already been talking about this morning to some extent, but when people go down these rabbit holes of maybe it's some conspiracy or some really fascinating truth about some historical episode that actually should be revised, the common understanding is not quite what it should be. I mean, I think that stuff's, it's great, but it's that stuff in the internet age is handed to you on a very impressive platter, right? You're watching, I mean, there's content creators out there that are producing something, okay, but they're producing these ideas. People are consuming these things, and you can go down a rabbit hole. How much hard work was it really? You clicked, you read, you got fed a bunch of really interesting stuff, but it's quite passive and it's quite easy. I mean, you get to sit on your backside, eat some nice food and play with your remote control on YouTube, and you might have done a YouTube rabbit hole or some internet search rabbit hole. That's work and that's research, but it's kind of getting fed by in that consumption dynamic. It's very difficult to take what you've just learned, that you've gone down a rabbit hole this weekend. Okay, how much of that rabbit hole was nonsense? How much of it do I need to cut away and find the kernel of important truth there? That's the first hard thing. Secondly, now what? And that now what question is people don't want to go there because that's where the energy is required, and that's actually where the real brain power kicks in, because now you've got to do your own thinking. You've been consuming other people's thinking down this rabbit hole, okay, and maybe you make some connections in your mind, but now you've got to say, right, I've just learnt this piece of knowledge, or I've just got a particular understanding, but I live, in Somerset West, or I live in Centurion in Pretoria, and what does that mean for me here? How, what does that mean for our very specific context? And suddenly your brain starts to hit little dead ends of like, that's hard. I have to stretch my mind on this, and that's actually energy consuming and difficult. And then that would have to result in some kind of an action. You know what? I'm just going to go down another rabbit hole. I'm just going to find the next juicy kind of conspiracy rabbit hole that I'm going to go down. And so I think that's very much part of this kind of consumption binging sort of get the next hit sort of theme. I think that what you see with this is people getting drawn, of course. So very much like a drug, this hit that people are after also requires greater levels of scandal and of secrecy and of deeper sort of insight to get that next hit. And so I think that pulls people into very often very strange and dark and kind of ridiculous directions.
And into purity spirals.
Because you now start to get addicted to this special knowledge, esotericism, Gnosticism.
This is old ancient stuff.
Yeah, it's very attractive. That, if you and I find out, let's suppose we find out some real information that's extremely important.
Yeah.
We find out some political information or some information about society right now. Just you and I find this out, and it's of exceeding importance. I mean, it's juicy. We're in this position of immense privilege. We have this information and we have this knowledge. We can act on it. We can share it. We can keep it to ourselves and make money from it. Whatever we want to do. So people love privileged information. That's just a human
secret knowledge.
Secret knowledge. So what you get in purity spiraling is you get people getting addicted to being part of an ever smaller group of special people who understand a particular matter in a very particular way. And in the extreme, you end up with very isolated individuals going down 400 different rabbit holes, constructing very elaborate mental constructs of the true reality out there. And a lot of guys are addicted to getting to the place where no one else shares their view.
Right.
They sort of share your view, but they've constructed their little matrix of knowledge in such a way that it's their unique perspective.
As
on
much
the world.
of common knowledge as we can deconstruct as possible,
Yes.
the more niche and the more elite you
exactly.
are.
So nothing in history is as you know it. Everything is false, and it's kind of it's just this endless deconstruction of common knowledge. It's actually a great way of putting
it's
it.
actually quite a postmodern phenomenon.
Yes, it actually very much is, and it's very much a part of this excessive kind of consumption culture, and so you'll get a lot of so conservatives will criticize libertarians, for example, and libertarians are known to purity spiral online. I'm more liberty-minded than you because you want a small state, but I don't want any state.
Yeah.
You don't want any.
You
state.
want
I don't
even
know.
basic rules like age of consent. I don't.
Yeah.
Even,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of purity spiraling. You actually get it. You see purity spiraling in the conservative movement. You see it in amongst reactionaries. You see it amongst the far right. I see it amongst Christians on the Christian debates.
in the mainstream, you see it amongst leftists.
Yeah. No, you do. I mean, the left also purity spirals, massively. In fact, very much that's what we're seeing now in this hyper woke movement. Just incessant kind of purity spiraling. If you don't accept, the most sort of obscure fetishes and sinful behavior, then you're not actually liberal, or you're not actually woke, or whatever the case may be. So purity spiraling is very much a symptom of this, and one of the subsequent consequences of purity spiraling is, it's really part of purity spiraling. It's just the hypocriticism that emerges for the people who are acting in the real world. Okay, the hyper scrutiny over all their actions. So people will look at a mayor running a city and go, yeah, but he didn't do that, and he didn't do that right, But they don't realize that to act in the real world as a mayor of a city, you have to manage 40,000 public servants, many of whom don't share your political beliefs.
Or openly hostile
Yeah,
towards
you have to combat organized crime within those structures. You have to build a broad coalition and a consensus, and you don't just get to kind of do whatever you want, and you've got budget constraints, and you've got all these sorts of things. And a classic symptom of this kind of political consumption, purity spiraling sort of online world is hyper idealism about what's politically possible. So you find people very frustrated. Why don't the DA do this, and why don't AfriForum do this, and why haven't you guys won this court case yet and solved this problem? It's like stuff.
Why are you doing 1,000 things instead of 10,000?
Yeah. So I don't want to suggest that organizations should be beyond criticism. Criticism is very healthy, very important, but you can see that often I can tell that people are living this kind of political consumption lifestyle when they engage in certain kinds of criticism. The other thing they engage in is there's a hyper cynicism and a hyper mistrust. And I've seen this actually directed at my own organization, Sakeliga, on certain corners of the internet, where Sakeliga is controlled opposition and it's actually working for the opposition somehow. You get these kind of things, and it's so funny because I wasn't involved in a large organization before this. I was a sort of independent consultant. When you're more isolated like that, you see the world in a certain way. You join an institution and you start understanding institutional constraints and dynamics. And anyway, it's just funny how you see how people from the outside can look in, and you see these sort of purity spiraling corners of the internet. Sakeliga didn't go extreme enough when it argued against, let's say, BEE. So actually, are they really against BEE? Because I'm super against BEE. The purity spiraler.
And the content creators that I consume online are super.
They're super against it. So Sakeliga is saying this thing, but actually we believe this. We believe that there should, and it's not necessarily then that Sakeliga would ultimately disagree with some of their conclusions. It's just that we're trying to operate in a very real space.
Perfect versus the real,
with real constraints. So. And of course, the minute you approach people like that and you say, well, what would you do and what are you doing? They go very quiet. So it's not that we want to be beyond criticism, absolutely not. But it's just very, very interesting to see the kind of cynicism and kind of conspiratorial thinking that emerges. Suddenly everyone, basically there's corners of the internet that don't trust anything or anyone. And that's just not a way to live. Trust is a critical and super important part of society. Doesn't mean you have to trust anyone or anything with no basis, but what you should do is you need to find things that you can trust. You need to find things that you can belong to, and that you can be part of. Isolation and this purity spiraling online isolation creates a tremendous sense of distrust of anything that's going on. It's basically political nihilism. So that's where this ends up. This ends up at political nihilism. And you see that the extreme versions of that on our side of the debate in South Africa are, okay, you won this court case, but, it's all going to hell anyway. You're just buying us maybe a few more years, but it's all screwed anyway, kind of thing. It's just complete political nihilism. When I see that, I know that I'm looking at someone who's not acting.
Because if they were, they'd understand.
If they were, they'd understand, but they'd also start getting very positive, not so much about the direction of the whole country, because realistically it's going in a bad direction and it's not all salvageable, right? But they'd get very positive about what they can affect in the real world, in their local situation, and that actually makes life worthwhile. It's fun. It's a fun process because you're now solving a challenging puzzle. How do I fix the land invasion problem where I live? That's a hard puzzle. Let me maybe try and solve it, and that might be hell of a rewarding in and of itself, just as a process of living. So I can see it's very easy for me to see people that are isolated political consumers online. There's a few very obvious traits that emerge. And I would like to encourage people who might be watching this and going, sure, I think maybe he's talking about me a little bit. I don't want to heap condemnation on people. I want to say, can turn it around. Get off your screens a bit. Take what you've learnt, because the internet is a phenomenal knowledge creation machine, and insight creation machine, and truth finding machine, and long may it be that. But take your insights from that, and don't spend your entire life stuck in the realm of theory and rabbit holes. At some point, you've got to say, right, I think I'm well equipped now.
No.
I will keep learning on the side, but I think I'm well enough equipped now to start going.
You exit the awareness phase.
Exit the awareness phase. Exit the awareness phase. There's this funny website. I think it's called something like "What White People Do" or something, and it's like white people love raising awareness. The awareness campaign.
Yeah.
They want to raise awareness for X, Y, Z. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awareness is now raised. One's now got to kind of get on with it, and so without trying to sound anti-intellectual, there's kind of a time to pause the learning, or slow the learning down.
Stop studying the train wreck.
Stop studying the train wreck. You can't read every book that was ever written, and you don't need to read every book that was ever written.
And you don't need to confirm or deny every historical event in the human history.
Correct. Get a healthy level of knowledge and insight. So definitely spend the time, but get to a place where you can then use it and act.
I think, Russell, a final thing that I wanted to discuss before we start wrapping up here is just the message of, well, I believe we're not up against gods. A lot of people, unfortunately, think that we are. I think when you go down a lot of these rabbit holes of conspiratorial thinking, you might very easily come under the impression that we are fighting against gods on earth. I mean, the world is ruled by
like Titans,
or evil Greek gods. And what can you do against the god? We are mere mortals. But at the same time, you mentioned it now, where when you join an organization and you start organizing with other people and actually start making a difference in the world, flawed as it may be, you start becoming subject of conspiracy theories yourself.
Yes.
I mean, you only once you've been the subject of a conspiracy theory do you really start thinking a bit differently about conspiratorial thinking. And I've experienced this with at AfriForum and Solidarity as well, and there's a very, very sad thing about it that really it troubles me, and that's the fact that specifically in the Afrikaner context, not many, it's a small handful of Afrikaners, but it's a small fringe that believe that the only way for 300,000 or 500,000, if you count the entire Solidarity movement, the only way to organize or unite 500,000 Afrikaner families around a cause is if it's some conspiracy, if it's controlled opposition, if it is approved by the government. That comes back to that idea of we're not up against gods.
Yeah.
If you believe the world is, well, maybe not so specific, if you believe we are up against incredibly godlike powerful forces that can manipulate reality in any way they want, they are so powerful, there's nothing we can do about it. Of course, when you see someone doing something about it, when you see someone pushing back realistically with real life examples, of course your brain is going to rationalize the only way they're achieving it is because they're being allowed to do it by the powers that be.
Yeah,
that's very dangerous.
Yes, and this positive action exposes people who are inactive, and they don't like it. I think it makes them feel a sense of inadequacy because they fundamentally deep down realize that they're not really doing anything. So I think that's one part of it. I think the other part of it, to be perhaps a bit more charitable to this kind of line of thinking, is I think it's just the result of a long period of demoralization. They've been on the losing end of a particular political equation for quite a long time, and they're isolated. Isolation is deadly when it comes to this kind of thing. People who are isolated and who don't act in some kind of organized fashion can't imagine firstly can't imagine, don't have a good perspective on what organized action means and how it comes about. And it feels overwhelmingly powerful to them. So if a few people get together and just organize something, to conspire has a sort of cynical connotation, but essentially to be of one objective, to say, right, we're going to get together and 5 friends in a suburb, and we're going to have one objective, and that objective is to, it's to get on the school board so that the school doesn't become run by crazy people.
Yeah.
Okay? That could be the objective, and they could achieve that objective, and it would look like there's this real kind of conspiracy going on. Well, in a sense, yeah, they are planning coordinated action to take over the school.
Yeah.
And then they did it. Well done. But you can't achieve those kinds of things when you just live in your mind and you live on the internet and you're political.
Or when you're
consumer,
unorganized.
and you're disorganized and you're a single actor. So I think part of this is a symptom of the isolated society, who, when they see organization, it looks overwhelmingly powerful to them, and they almost get a little bit afraid of it in some ways, and perhaps intimidated by it.
And rightly so. We are up against powerful enemies and opponents.
Yeah, and I'm even just talking about how they would appraise an AfriForum, for example, someone who's essentially kind of on their side of the debate, but they would sort of go, sure, how are these guys actually getting it? They're getting it right through day in, day out hard work, fundraising, mobilization. It's a full-time effort. But just to say that I think isolation makes these organized forces like states seem extremely powerful and overwhelming. And we do live in an era where the state has become extremely and awesomely powerful in many ways, and I'm talking globally. And society has become atomized and disjointed and quite unpowerful in many ways. And I think people think that they're sort of part of a big, powerful movement through the internet and the sharing of ideas, and there can be that. Ideas can bubble up to the surface and be very powerful and check government behavior and so on. But by and large, a lot of that is just idea. It's the realm of ideas. It's this realm of political consumption and isolation. And the guys who are acting in an organized fashion have multiples of influence over the real situation. And I think that's what's intimidating to people. And that maybe feels godlike to the isolated individual.
Right.
And I would say that perception changes the minute you start getting part of something organized, and you start to realize, hey, this kind of leverage of organized action is actually possible.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. I think the second thing to say is that our opponents very often are just walking into an empty void and just controlling it, not because they're awesomely powerful, just because they showed up. Yeah. They just showed up. Woody Allen famously said 80% of success is just showing up.
Yeah.
That's very true. You just got to show up. Some of these, schools get
school board meetings boring. You don't want to be there. You want to sit there for hours. Yeah.
Exactly. Someone's got to show up.
But the leftists show up. They're going to be there. They're going to wait till everyone's goes, okay, now we vote.
Exactly. So you got to show up. And I think I think people that because they're isolated and disorganized, and because there's governments or various organizations that kind of show up and start acting strategically, it seems like an overwhelming force. And so my encouragement would be to for people to get part of things, to get involved in things, and also stop overestimating our enemy, stop overestimating those who oppose us. I see people online, they will do this. We will, the ANC will do X,
Whatever
Y, and Z.
we build will be destroyed.
They will destroy it. They will do this. It's incredibly toxic thinking.
Yeah.
Incredibly toxic thinking. And they will hide behind the fact, I'm just a realist. I've seen what's going on. You've got to, that's just toxic thinking. You've got to change that mindset. Yes, defeat is possible. Yes, they could destroy some stuff, but it's not inevitable.
Yeah.
If we don't show up, they will destroy things.
Yeah.
If we show up and act and resist and organize, we actually have a chance in some domains and in some realms, in winnable spaces. That's what digging a trench is all about. Showing up and actually saying, no, we're going to fight for this particular place and this particular environment or whatever. So yeah, I see this kind of very defeatist thinking, and and then people share these memes. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Yeah, and they share it like it's gloom and doom. No. How about we will win, and we will defend our communities, and we will have a prosperous future.
Yeah.
Let's be inevitabilist in the positive sense and in our sense. So yeah, I think that people, to get over this mindset of defeatism, they've got to start getting out of their isolation, political consumption, and online isolation, the rabbit hole culture, the deep conspiracy culture, the deep cynicism culture,
The distrust.
the distrust that produces no excellent political action. You'll know it by its fruits, right? Yeah, you'll know them by their fruits. The fruits of this are inaction and losing. They're not. This is not a winning strategy. These are not winners we're talking about. This is a movement that sits and wallows in defeat, and I think that's the kind of fruit that we should judge it by. And people need to. If people watching this feel like they at times slide into that sort of world, let this be an encouragement that you don't have to go there. You can step out, even if it's the smallest beginning. An institution is two people who agree on a project and get it done. That's an institution. So start an institution with two, and then build to 3 and 4.
Yeah, and I think Flip Bay sums it up very well when people always express this idea that whatever you build is just going to be destroyed. So, well, there's always the risk of failure, but there's a risk bigger than trying, and that is not trying, because then defeat is certain.
Yeah, well, if you don't build the thing, then it doesn't exist ever.
Yeah.
If you build it and it gets destroyed, at least it existed for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's value,
And there's still the option that it exists for longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Russell, I think this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. This is the type of message that I wanted to share with people, because I know you are also, from what I can gather, in that space where you are also focusing on where does my focus need to be, what can I do, and what can the people around me do to have an impact on reality, not just gain truths about reality, but now that you have that truth on your side, how can you turn that truth into action? Because we as Christians understand it as well. You're not just an actor in God's play. You're also a piece of an instrument in His hands. God does not accept. Can't just trust that everything will work out. You sit back and relax, and God will figure out everything else. Like, no, you have agency. You can also influence the world around you.
In the parable of the 10 talents. Burying your talents underground would be in this conversation, to my mind, would be spending your time in political consumption and isolation, and not actually getting out there and taking risk and acting in the real world. And it's taking those talents that you actually have God given to be able to be a political creature, to be a person in community that can act and take some risks and create order, and it's just hoarding all those talents and not using them, and just consuming politics. So I think it's a great message that people really need to hear. It's a critical message, particularly in this time. Politics is not meant to be a permanent spectator sport. People have to learn that politics happens right outside their doorstep. Right as their private property ends, politics begins. And they can start making a difference in that, right in their street that they live in.
Yeah, in conclusion, I'd like to use two animals that we know in South Africa as a metaphor for what have been talking about. The first one, their English name escapes me now. In Afrikaans, they're versamelvoëls. You see them in the Kalahari. They build these massive nests on telephone poles and in trees. They build these massive, massive nests, and they are exercising what we need to be doing. One of those little birds, if you've seen the Kalahari Desert, it's a very hard place to survive. It's just red dunes everywhere. But these birds have learned that if we stick together and build a center of order, we can survive and thrive. But one of them alone is going to perish in the desert. The other animal that I'd like to use as a metaphor is the porcupine. So in the Kruger National Park, there's lions. I mean, that's a ferocious enemy. A lion can eat almost any little animal that it finds. But there's porcupines as well. The porcupines are thriving as well. The porcupines don't fear the lion. You can see many videos online of a lion walks a circle around a porcupine. Same with a badger. I've seen many videos of badgers fighting off a lion because their skin is so thick. The lion can bite, nothing happens. The badger just bites them back. But that's the type of asymmetrical resistance strategy that can have a massive effect. Yes, we're up against lions, but we can be a porcupine or a badger that can survive in that environment. And I think that's the type of lessons that I'd like to take from nature and the nature that we see all around us in South Africa. Those Kalahari birds, and then also the badger and the porcupine. In asymmetric warfare, asymmetric resistance. You can resist against a stronger enemy.
And badgers and porcupines aren't wired by God to be able even to be nihilistic, and as a result
they don't just give up and
so
stop breeding.
They just survive, and we
thrive
and we need to drop the nihilism, drop the inevitable defeatism, and enjoy the fight and enjoy the problem solving. I think that's, if I may just leave people with my final insight, is there's no guarantees of victory, there's no guarantees of success. As you say, if you don't fight, you definitely lose. That's the first thing. Secondly, the process is part of life. It's part of what makes things enjoyable. Solving the puzzle, trying to fix the problem, trying to address the challenges. They come to occupy your focus and your mind and your thinking in a very constructive way and in a very satisfying way. So people need to, I think, get encouraged by the fact that the process is part of it. We're aiming for some future that we think is better than the world we have now. But what if we don't get there? Does that mean our lives came to nothing? Does that mean we didn't live fulfilling lives? No, we got to. The journey is part of the point, and maybe it's the whole point. The journey, the journey is critical. So get on that journey. Don't be defeatist. Don't be nihilistic. The nihilism will corrode the soul. And there's far too much nihilism on our side of the debate.
Ja, wel Eddie Du Plessis het gesê die man wat sy deelname weier is die man wat sy nasie vermoor. The man who refuses to take part is the man who murders his nation. And I think that's the message that I'd like to end it on. We are not up against gods. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for all your comments and sharing this far and wide. I want to make this also one of those episodes that people find a lot of insightful things in, and I hope you did. And if you want to share your thoughts or your questions, leave them in the comment section. You can also subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much, Russell, for your time.